So picture me, it's the beginning of 2024 and I, somebody who very rarely has been going to music gigs in their 30s, has booked not one, not two, but 6 music shows to go to, like live shows. That makes sound old. Music shows, gigs, if you will. You won't, I understand. And while I spent a lot of money, £343.41 to be exact, I was like, this is going to be so wholesome, it's going to be good for my spirit, good for my artistic development. I'm just so excited that I'm finally making time to go to live music. Cut to the end of 2024 and all I feel is a kind of riddled regret, and I look back at the shows that I went to and the money that I spent and go, is this what other people are doing? In fact, I went into 2025 with the genuine intention of avoiding going to music shows or gigs unless it was something really special and I knew that I was going to have a good time. So I'd like to spend this video breaking down why my expectations were so high and why I felt that while I had a good time with my friends and the atmosphere was great, I felt really let down by the experience of going to shows. I hadn't been going to shows because of COVID, really. I used to go to quite a few when I was young, and like many people that turned 30 during the pandemic, I feel like I have woken up in what was essentially my 40s and found out that I hadn't really gone to that many gigs, and that was something that I really missed. So I want to talk a little bit about why I think on a personal level I didn't have a good time most of the time for the money that I paid, and also just on a more like pragmatic, wider scale, why I think our expectations for live entertainment has gone down even though the prices have gone up, and why we might need to demand more for ourselves and arguably more for the artists. Now before we get into it, let me tell you who I saw and how much I paid. For full transparency, I paid £30.50 to see Newton Faulkner. I paid £200 to see Taylor Swift, which was a resale ticket, and I was in a very, very good seat, or so I thought. We'll get into that later, but this is where I was sitting in the stadium, like pretty cool. I paid £15 to see Seth Lakeman, always a bargain. I paid £35.37 to see Chapel Roan in London, and before anybody asks, how did you get tickets? I just bought them when they came out because I was listening to her before everybody else, but and the tickets I didn't even have to sit in like an internet queue. It was very easy to get and very cheap. Anyway, and then I got bleachers tickets for £48.55, and then finally I saw Orla Gartland for £13.99, which is the price of her album because she did a live show in Birmingham HMV. Now I don't for 1 minute want you to think that I don't understand how bloody economically lucky I am to be able to go to those gigs, and to think of it as more of like a genuine debate in my head as to whether I should do that again next year. A lot of people don't get the chance to spend that much on going to gigs, let alone every year, or to decide whether they could or not. But I do think talking about the quality of what we're getting in exchange for the money that we are paying is really important, especially the larger the proportion of the ticket price compared to your income is. Those people who are spending like a significant portion of their income going to those gigs that really matter to them, the stakes are even higher, and therefore the product should be even better. I also think that while my spending last year on live music was high for me, I know that like there are a huge proportion of people for who they spent way more money on it. I saw people getting into debt to go to Taylor Swift, selling their car to go to the Eras tour, like really insane stuff like that. And while obviously I think it's up to the consumer to a certain point to gauge what is going to send them into financial ruin, and probably they shouldn't do, I also think there is a level of exploitative media that implies that, and we're part of it as well, the people who go to the gigs imply that if you don't go to the gig then you're not a real fan of an artist, or you haven't truly experienced their music, and that simply one night in your life in a crowd can change everything about your existence. And I talked in my video about specifically going to the Eras tour about how I felt like more immersed, more part of something more artistically enriched by watching the Eras tour on TV than I did in the arena. And I mentioned the fact that I feel like if you experienced the Eras tour from a live stream, or you watched it and you talked to other people about it, you should consider yourself an attendee of the Eras tour as much as somebody who had a ticket and was standing in that Arena. So let me tell you about some reasons why I think we're not having as good a time at shows as we could be. And don't worry, after my moan at the end, some ideas of how to fix it. The first thing is being able to see the show. Very, very low bar, you'd think. But no, as a 5'2" woman, I have never been able to see anything in the standing area. I've had some very heartbreaking nights of my life where I've just literally not been able to see anything. Like, I probably think that my sight line starts about 6 feet above the musician's head, and I was thinking, oh, that's me, I'm a short ass, that's why I have to go and sit in the seated area because like I'm unusual in that I'm short. But then I looked at the average height of a woman in the UK, and the average height, I kid you not, is only 4 centimeters shorter than I am. I'm 5'2", which is 157.48 centimeters for your information, and the average woman is 1.61.7 centimeters. So really, I am probably the average, and I just have a theory, please fill me in below, that most women aren't able to actually stand in the main part of a gig and see anything. And that's not just because we're short or because some of the audience are taller, although that does play a factor. It's that what I've noticed is that most of the stages that we're looking at aren't raised high enough. Like, if the stage was higher, it would be fine. This isn't an us issue, it's a venue issue, and it's very, very frustrating. Speaking of venues, a lot of venues in the UK are converted venues. So they used to be theatre venues where the plan was for the whole audience to sit, which is no longer happening. Evidenced most effectively, I think, with the O2 Arena in Brixton, which is a beautiful converted theatre and like one of the most prestigious venues in the UK, but fucking awful for seeing things. Do you know why? Because there is no enforcement or regulations around people actually sitting in the seated area. Most people stand, and because the gradient of the seated area is only designed for people to sit so they can see the stage, it is not dramatic enough an incline for people who are standing to be able to see the stage. It is also completely, like, I didn't see, me and Hannah, my friend Hannah, who's shorter than me, went to go and see Chapel Roan, and I think of the whole gig, I would generously estimate that I saw actually Chapel Roan's actual body for probably about 8 minutes of the show. I showed my partner Craig this footage of the Chapel Roan gig, and he was like, oh my god, you can actually kind of like, it's not that bad, you can't see it. And I was like, no, that's the view I had, that's the view my phone had when I held it this high in the air. That is not what I could see. That's what my phone could see. And we'll get on to that, the representation of what we see on shows on social media, later. I was also sitting next to 2 people that did have physical disabilities during one of the shows, and seeing how often they had to sit and not see anything of the show, I could see them being visibly frustrated, was really, really annoying, and obviously much more horrific to actually experience. But just in moments like that, I'm like, why are we paying these venues so much when we can see, if you have any kind of physical ailment, or you are apparently the average height for a woman in the UK, you will not be able to access the thing that you have paid to have access to. Like, that's insane. Sight is also to do with the way the shows are designed. For example, when I saw the Eras tour, I was expecting Taylor Swift to be very far away. For the ticket price, devastating, to be honest. She was like a tiny speck on the horizon, but I was expecting for the cameras to show more of what was going on stage so that I could watch the screens. But the screens only followed her. They didn't really follow the dancers or anything else, and it felt very like one-dimensional the way it was filmed. The also big problem with most outdoor shows, and this is not just Taylor Swift specific, but any outdoor show I've seen, usually one of the tools that they use to reach the audience when there's only like one tiny human that everybody wants to see is through lighting, and lighting is completely wasted in the summer outside. I could see none of the lighting effects for most of the Eras tour show, and that was again like poor planning on their part. Another part of the staging that I thought was a big issue, and this is really interesting because I saw Bleachers and Chapel Roan in exactly the same venue, actually sitting in exactly the same row, just at different points in the row, but within a few months of each other. And it was so noticeable how much more I could see of Bleachers, not only because Bleachers is a band, so admittedly there are more of them to see, but because the way that that people had staged the Chapel Roan show, I don't think it was her fault, the way they had staged the Chapel Roan show was that Chapel Roan stood at the front of the stage for the whole show, making her completely invisible to the balcony, like completely invisible. Whereas Bleachers staged their whole show around the whole, so they went to the back of the stage, they used the side of the stage, there were lots of different raised platforms as part of the stage so that the whole band could move around and you could see them at different points, and it was really imaginatively seen, and I actually had a really good time at Bleachers despite the fact that we were in a poorly planned, quite shit venue for seeing, in my opinion. They planned the staging so as we would be able to see as much as possible, and I was able to see much more of that show, which is a shame because I love Chapel Roan and I wish I had been able to I could hear her and she sounded amazing but could I see her? Absolutely freaking not. The second problem is supply and demand. Admittedly, when I look at the list of people that I saw last year, the more famous they were and the more people that were at the gig, the worse my experience was, which you'd think would be, you know, leveled out arguably to be like, but you got to see one of the most famous people in the world, like that's why, because everybody wants to see them. And also more people means more of an amazing atmosphere. Like, wasn't it amazing to be among, you know, 50,000 people, 20,000 people? And it is amazing. There is a special something about being in a room with that many people, although I do think to a certain extent our brains can't compute the difference between 1,000 and 10,000. So I do wonder, like, the gradient of how good that is. So I felt like, as a human, I don't know what the science is, but I felt like, yes, it is amazing to be surrounded by a crowd, but how many in the crowd? Does it matter that much? I'm not sure. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. But also when I think about that argument, like, oh, you paid because they're a better artist, in inverted commas, according to the charts and the popularity and the people that love them, but also because you're getting a better experience because of the atmosphere, arguably, aren't we bringing the atmosphere then? Isn't that the audience? Aren't the audience bringing the value? And therefore that doesn't mean the ticket price should be higher. In fact, I think maybe the ticket price should be lower because we're the people creating the good experience for others, despite the fact that it is pretty physically impossible to give everybody the value of their ticket when you're selling them on this scale. Exponentially, by that logic, the price should fall the bigger the gig is. And that's something kind of hopeful. That's something like nice from my meditations on this period, is that we bring the value, like we are the value, and that is quite sweet really when you think about it. However, I think I'm a spoilt brat about this idea of value because I love seeing stuff in like the theatre so much, especially musical theatre. I've always loved doing that, and I've always felt like I've got more than my money's worth when I have paid to see stuff. And I think this is why I'm passionate about people who say they like live music. I'm like, but have you tried going to see a musical? I made a whole video about that up here, but like, have you tried the live experience of a musical? Because for example, if you go and see Wicked in the West End, there will be about 30 performers on stage, more than the Eras tour. There was actually, I think again, suspiciously few performers on the Eras stage, considering how much people were paying and how many opportunities there were for the audience to be able to see the dancers up close. You could have fitted twice as many dancers on that stage and it would have still been great, better even. Anyway, there's about 30 performers in a Wicked show, right? They're all on stage for like 3 hours, which is what Taylor Swift did, so fair enough. But for the other shows, like I would say maximum 90 minutes. Sometimes some of the shows I've been to see are only 40 minutes long, but they're on stage for like, on average, I think twice as long as everybody else. You're getting twice as much value. There's more of them, more of these amazing talented people, and they're all changing costume way more often. I love how often Taylor Swift changed costume during her show, but that is very, very unusual. Most men don't change at all. Please tell me if you've gone to see a man who has changed outfit. Maybe Harry Styles changed his outfit, let me know, I don't know. But apart from that, men just don't. Women do maybe twice, 3 times, 4 times during a gig, but the amount of costumes you get to see in a West End show is absolutely freaking incredible. Not only that, you're also getting the live experience of it. Like most of the time there's a live orchestra as well, and sometimes you can even see them. So that's what, when we're thinking about headcount of how many talented people you get to see and for how long and how much visual input there is in a West End show versus a gig, I'm also thinking that's why I felt short-changed, because I have been spoiled. I've been spoiled by musical theatre. You get so much for your ticket price, and on average for a West End show I pay way less, even if there is somebody famous in it. For example, I saw Cara Delevingne in Cabaret and that was like 50 quid, and I was probably like a stone's throw away from her. You know, it's not all about the fact that there aren't any celebrities in these things either. And then the final problem, I think, might be us. Unfortunately, I can't blame it all on the man. I think some of it might be us. There have been some really interesting think pieces around people not knowing how to, especially like people who are younger, who grew up during lockdown. They don't know, they haven't had the slow initiation into live gig etiquette and what makes sure that everybody else who has paid to see something has a good time. And I think those think pieces are really interesting, but I do think people who are my age as well are guilty of this. Live etiquette in general has gone down. One of the reasons I couldn't see Chapel Roan was because of the gradient in the seating and the fact that nobody was seated in the seated area and the design of the venue. But it was also because about 3 rows of people in front of me were all recording the show on their phone. And when you think about maths and perspective, the amount, like, your phone feels very small and you're holding it in your hand, but when you're holding it in front of a stage that somebody else is trying to see behind you, you could block the whole stage with your phone. Like, it's insane. And I know that some people do watch that footage back and it's valuable to them and etc, okay, but I do think recording huge swathes of the show, like so many people I saw did, I was really shocked about how many people were doing that. Huge swathes, like longer than would be like a great clip on Instagram or TikTok or something, like really long parts of the show. You're essentially duplicating your memory so that somebody else cannot have a memory at all. Like, and that is something that I think about a lot, in that I get that people want to keep memories, and I think also the problem is we're paying so much for these gigs that we want to get our value and we want to be able to watch it back, because we're kind of even subconsciously aware that we're not getting the value from the moment. So we are like pre-recording the moment in advance of feeling disappointed so that we can watch it back and feel like there was value, or share it on social media and add to our own personal brand and value from paying for the ticket, and therefore justifying the expense of the ticket by filming the show. But I just think that it's fucking over everybody else. And I am a grumpy old woman about it. And of course I filmed clips when I was at these shows, like maybe I would say maximum 40 seconds in total over several things. Like I just filmed very specific parts of songs that I really loved, and so that I could show it on social media as well and show how excited I was about these artists. But it's become so normalised to film shows, even shows that you can watch back on YouTube anyway. I don't know, am I being grumpy about that? Let me know in the comments. Maybe now I've said it, I feel like I'm being really grumpy about it, but I just feel like that is one of the things that ruined so many of the shows for me. I also think that there is an altered expectation of what we will get when we pay for these shows because of the footage that is being shown on social media and how powerful people's zooms and phone cameras are becoming. No longer do we have like scrawny pixelated footage from the back of a dark auditorium. Some of these phones, like I've seen people share the footage versus what they actually saw, have such powerful cameras that you're giving people an impression on social media that you can see way more of the show than you actually can, or you're doing what I did and holding their cameras in the air and pretending you're 8 foot tall. Again, inflating the value of these tickets and in justifying how much they are sold for online. And then that gets into my thought process around like how hard it is for us all to meet up in person and have special memorable moments without paying for them. Like the third space is dying, and how expensive it is to meet up with people and really see people. And these are these moments that you have with the people that you love, that you want to remember forever, because you don't get to see them as often as you'd like, and all of the capitalism hellscape that comes with that. And how I understand why people want to record these moments and have these moments and pay a lot of money for these moments, even if objectively they might have felt disappointed had they really thought about the price of the ticket versus what they got. And that makes me think a lot about Jordan Teresa's video she did recently about lookalike competitions in public and how they capture this like spontaneous moment of strangers gathering. And I love that she calls it, I never forgot this, town square core. And this idea that we've lost this beautiful element of being able to meet up and feel the presence of each other and enjoy collective experiences together without paying a shit ton of money for everything. And that gives me hope that that stuff is happening, and maybe we can get back to that a little bit. It's also made more complicated because there are less shows to go to objectively. In the UK in 2003, an average of 2 live music venues shut every week, and in 2024 it was 1 every 2 weeks, so better. but still not good. 40% of all the UK's grassroots music venues at the moment are operating on a loss last year, despite Ticketmaster and people like that making a huge amount of profit. So even if we do discover smaller independent artists, there are less opportunities for us to go and see them and less venues for us to do that at. On reflection, the smaller artists that I got to see this year and had an amazing view, an amazing experience, are artists that I discovered like 10 or 15 years ago, like Newton Faulkner, Seth Lakeman. These are names that I enjoyed when I was 14. The euphoria is created because how rare the experience has become for us, and there's the supply and demand element again. But anyway, without being grumpy, what are some answers that I have thought about? Well, I don't have any answers, but I have guesses at answers. How's that? Kate Nash is doing a really interesting thing at the moment, selling her bum on OnlyFans and spreading the word about why she thinks live music is dying in the UK and how artists aren't going to be able to flourish in the future. And she's like, she calls it like bums for tour buses, and she's like selling pictures of her bum to fund her tour. So there's some really interesting interviews about that. I'll leave those below. But her suggestion is that if £1 from every ticket sale goes towards the Music Venue Trust, we could really start solving things. I think that's a really great solution. I'm personally going to try and start becoming not only a fan of artists, but of venues that I love, and supporting the venues that I think are designed for people to see the show. Revolutionary, I know. And also just like try and go and see stuff at that venue, even stuff that I haven't heard of as much, and not always being led by the artist that I'm seeing, but also trying to support those venues and see and trusting their curation, that whoever they've invited might actually be worth my time seeing. I am trying to be more honest about my experience of a show, not only just being like it was great, but giving like genuine feedback to my friends when they ask me about how the experience was, and not feeling like that as a reflection on the artist or how good the artist was. Not just to be like, it changed my life, it was unmissable. I'm like, yeah, Chapel Roan has changed my life, she is unmissable, but I'll tell you what, the venue was not good. And that, I think that honesty with the people around us is really important when they're making economic, financial decisions about what they spend money on, in the same way that we might be honest about a book that we read or a clothing brand that we've used. It's the same thing, and I don't think we're encouraged to be skeptical, because it seems ungrateful and it seems gloomy or Eeyore-like to complain about having such an amazing experience. But I do think it's important that we still remember that we are paying for a service, and if we don't get the service, we're allowed to say so. I also want to tap out of this notion that you have to see an artist in person at a live show to truly be a fan. I don't think that's fair. I think it's kind of ableist, and I also think that some filmings of shows are so good right now that you can totally experience it that way, or meet up with other fans in other ways and do like, you know, Swiftageddon is when you can go and like dance with other Taylor Swift fans even though Taylor Swift isn't there. Like events like that, which I think are really valuable, and whenever I see them, I'm going to try and support them. And from a sustainability perspective, I have to remember that if we're going to move towards an experience economy rather than a things economy, which generally I think would be very good for the planet, we have to make sure those experiences are genuinely good. Otherwise, if people aren't having a good time, they're not going to do it, and they are going to sit on Temu and buy physical plastic objects instead to get that hit, because the physical experience is not giving them that. The live experience doesn't have that same value. So I think in being grumpy, we are fighting for the planet, because we're saying we need experience economies, and therefore we need actual good experiences that are good and thoughtful and affordable, and include as many people as physically possible, although maybe not all at once, so that you can make the maximum amount of profit. I think that like trying to please 70,000 people all at the same moment is kind of an unachievable task. Just some feedback for the arena tours that are being planned right now. I think you're flying too close to the sun and you might melt. Anyway, let me know your best and worst live music experiences this year. If you like the idea of discovering new music and smaller artists, I do a playlist on one of my tiers on Patreon every month, where I put like some of the like classic artists that I just love anyway, and you might have missed all the big artists and stuff that I'm loving, but also a lot of smaller artists that I'm purposely trying to hunt down and discover and support, because I love them and I think they're good, and I think for God's sake we need music, especially right now. I need it more than ever. So making sure as an audience member that I can continue to be part of the healthy part of that economy as much as possible is important. So if you're interested in joining Patreon and discovering new music with me, I'll leave the links to that below too. Feel free to tell me that I'm being grumpy. That's okay as well. And I'm very grateful that I saw Chapel Row live, because I'm very aware that I probably never will be able to again. Thank you to all the friends that I attended these wonderful live events with, because they literally made it worth it for me. I still have glowing magical memories from them at that time, even if it wasn't from what the venue itself was giving me. Also, if you're going to do a music event, which means that people will have come to see the music, maybe don't like leave a big hole in your roof for all the music to escape through. Just a thought. Put a roof on your arena, because I can't fricking hear a thing.